Hello, my name is Joviane, and I'm part of the Innovation Showcase team here at Snowflake. Today, I'll walk you through replicating financial data from a PostgreSQL database into Snowflake using the Snowflake Connector for PostgreSQL. Then, we'll store that data in a dynamic table to display near real-time data in a Streamlit dashboard to gain some insight into the data. I have my PostgreSQL database previously set up, but I can show you the process in doing so. So I am using Visual Studio Code, and in Visual Studio Code, I went to the marketplace to get this extension here, this database manager, after typing in PostgreSQL. So this is the one that I'm using in this video. And so now here I am using Visual Studio Code to set up my PostgreSQL database. I had done this previously. However, we'll quickly walk you through the process that I had used. So the first thing I did was I used this Docker compose YAML file and I ran this command docker compose up-d so that I can initiate my PostgreSQL database. So after doing so, I went ahead into the marketplace to get this PostgreSQL database manager. I had installed it, and then I went ahead and I created a connection with this database manager. So I created the connection to this PostgreSQL database, and here I had everything's already populated, but I had created my schema and my tables. In our case, since we're looking at financial data, we have our customers, merchants, products, and transactions tables in our Postgres database. And then afterwards, I had loaded those four tables with CSV files, customers, merchants, products, and transaction CSV files. And then I made sure to run this publication statement so that the Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL can successfully replicate these tables from PostgreSQL into Snowflake. And lastly, I just ran these four select all statements so that I can check to see that my tables have loaded correctly with all the data. Now we're going to install our Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL native application. We navigate to the marketplace under data products, and we can type in PostgreSQL. And once we do that, we're going to click into the Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL. We're going to click Get. And quickly we'll check here. The application name has been filled out for us, and this is the warehouse that I'll be using. Next, we're going to navigate into Snowsite. We'll go to Data Products Marketplace and type in PostgreSQL. And once you do that, we can click on the Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL. Now that we clicked into the native app, we're going to install it on our account. We're going to click on Get. And here, this information has been pre-filled out for us. And here is our warehouse that we use for installation. And then we will click on Get again to install it. After installing the native app in our account, we will be greeted with this successfully installed message. We're going to click Done. Then we'll navigate to the apps page. And now we'll click on the Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL application. Once we do that, we will be greeted with this wizard that will walk us through the configuration steps. So on this page, we're going to click Mark All as Done and then click Start Configuration. So to configure our connector, we have all this information already pre-filled for us. We have our compute warehouse and our agent role and user pre-filled here as well. And we're going to click Configure. Once that step is done, we're going to download the configuration file. This file has the Snowflake credentials needed to establish the connection between the agent and the native application. Navigating back to our Visual Studio Code, we have in our Postgres data directory, I've gone ahead and made our agent PostgreSQL directory within this one. In this directory, we're going to have two directories, our agent keys and our configuration. The agent keys will have our public and private keys that we will need to connect to Snowflake. This will auto-populate when I run the docker compose up-d command. And here in our configuration directory, we have our data sources, JSON, and our PostgreSQL configuration file. And the last thing that we will need to do is to add in our Snowflake JSON file that we just downloaded. Now that we have our Snowflake JSON within the configuration file, I will go ahead and run this command. And so now once this is complete, we will need to go back into Snowsite, into our application to verify that our Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL native app has successfully connected to our agents. So here is both our private and our public key. These auto-populated right when I did the Docker command inside the terminal. So back in our Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL application, we're going to verify our agent connection. This is where we had previously downloaded the one-time use configuration file. So now that we have run the Docker command inside our VS Code, we're going to click refresh so that we can verify that the agent connection was successful. All right, so once we verified a successful configuration, we will see this message show up. Now we're going to navigate to our projects and notebook section in Snowsite so that we can upload our notebook to create the connector destination database. So what we'll do is click on this arrow here and click on import IPYNB. And I already have a file here, so I'm going to open it. I'm going to rename this to CDC destination setup. Okay. And we're going to click on our database and schema. And it looks like we already have our warehouse selected as well. And we're going to make sure run on warehouse selected. And we're going to click on create. So here we will have our notebook. And there are instructions here in the notebook that indicate what we're doing here in the process. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run the cell create destination database. All right. So this cell is done. Then now what we're going to do is add our data sources. In this cell, we call the add data source right here. And we have the name of our data source. So PSQL DS1 is PostgreSQL data source 1. And this will be the name of our database. And these other statements here, where we add our tables, is where we're going to add in our tables using the connector with this call statement to then replicate those four tables that we had in our PostgreSQL database sitting within the raw CDC schema. Customers, merchants, products, and transactions, they're called here. And this will begin the replication process here within Snowflake. Okay, so once that is done, we will have this message here saying success. And then now the next step is to then we're going to check the replication state. We'll have to run this quite a few times. So right now we're at the step where there is the schema introspection. So The information is now loading in through from PostgreSQL through the connector into Snowflake. And we will check every minute or so that these two columns here, the schema introspection status and the snapshot replication status, they will both show that they're done. So once these two columns have the status of done, we will know that our tables have finished replicating from PostgreSQL into Snowflake. Okay, so now that the replication state is all done, we can see our schema introspection status column and snapshot replication status column both have the status done for all four of our tables. So this SQL statement here should be empty right after the initial load. This populates as there is new records that are in the PostgreSQL database. And then Snowflake captures that by showing the new records here that have come in since the initial load that we have up here after we called these functions. Okay. So now we're going to check that our tables have been properly loaded. And it looks like that's our customers table, merchants, products, and our transaction tables are all loaded in successfully. All right. Now what we're going to do is this is where we're creating our dynamic table. And so this dynamic table is where we will be querying so that we can populate our dashboard with queries called from this table. And this table will also, we have this target lag right here, this argument of 1 minute. So between when the tables have been updated from PostgreSQL, it takes about a minute for this dynamic table to show the changes, to have the changes reflected in here. So here we're creating our dynamic table with the customers, products, transaction, and merchants tables. And this is where we're going to do that right here. And now we see everything as well. Okay. And we also can see everything here with our dynamic table labeled customer purchase summary. All right. So now we're going to navigate to projects and then Streamlit so that we can see customer board. All right. We're going to choose a database and schema and have our app warehouse, and then we're going to click on create. Once we do that, the Streamlit application will open. I already have the code on my clipboard, so I'm going to paste that right in. And then I'm going to go ahead okay. So now we have our Streamlit application that has been loaded. So here is our customer purchase summary. Next, we're going to now have our Streamlit application that will use our dynamic table that we had created earlier. So we're going to navigate to projects and then Streamlit, and then we're going to click on Streamlit app. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to rename the application to customer purchase summary, or whatever name that you would like to use. For this example, we're using customer purchase summary. Then we're going to click on our database and schema, and we already have our warehouse selected for us, and we're going to click on create. And now next, what we're going to do is to replace the code that has already been filled in. So now we copy pasted over the code that was previously here. And now we're going to click on run so that the Streamlit app can update with the new code that we had pasted in. So here's our dashboard called Customer Purchase Summary. This dashboard shows It takes from our dynamic table that has our transactions, customer, product, and merchant information. So here we can see that we have all of the purchases by customer ID. So we have our transactions, some demographic information of the customers, and what they bought, where they bought it from, and whatnot, and what credit cards they have used, and the age group that these customers belong to. We also have on the dashboard indicated, identified who our high, medium, and low spenders are. And we have some filters here as well. So here we can filter by low, medium, or high spenders. We have our start and end dates. We can filter by age group as well, or by customer ID. For example, if we want to look at this customer, we can see they made a transaction on September 4th, 2024, and they used Visa for this transaction. And also we can see that they bought from this category, which is the tech category. And it looks like they purchased at Microsoft on that day and spent $8,906. Okay, so now that we have our Streamlit application ready to go, the last thing that we're going to do is that we're going to call the stored procedure. This stored procedure inserts new transactions into the transactions table in PostgreSQL, and with inserting about 1,000 records every minute. And so when this stored procedure is called in PostgreSQL, these new transactions will then populate inside Snowflake, and our dynamic table will update with the new records. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually create our stored procedure, and then now we're going to call it. So this, for about 30 minutes, this stored proc will be inserting 1,000 records for 30 minutes, or for every minute of those 30 minutes. So now we're going to actually call the stored proc here. Okay. And so now that we have called the stored procedure, we will see this refresh button here, and we will now see that the information here will change. Here, we'll see that most of the transactions are taken on this date, which is today. So that's why we have such a long column here. But we will see in a moment. Here we go. So the amount of high spenders, medium spenders, and low spenders has changed. Everything actually has changed here. And the table is being populated as well with the new transactions here. So while that's happening, I can show you how, let's use some of these filters here. So let's go and filter this data by GenX. And looking at this information here, we see this is the total spent between these two dates with people who are in this generation. And with these new transactions coming in, we can see that it looks like American Express is almost close with Visa, neck and neck, but it's the preferred choice of payment here. And let's do a quick refresh so that we can see if there's more data has come in. I have it filtered right now, but this will update as well. So if we go back to all of our age groups to include data from all of our age groups, we can refresh the button. I have to say, we have to remember that the dynamic table will show a new data reflected because with that lag time of 1 minute. So for now, this is close to real time that we can get. So we see that this has updated. So for example, if we wanted to look at the spend status of our customers, let's say we want to look at our low spenders, we can see that we can provide, for example, a promotion for our customers. Um, For example, like let's say we're going to offer them $800 credit for customers that have spent $1,500 or more at Amazon over the period of 6 months, for example. We can play around for a bit just to see what different promotions that we can offer our customers in this example that we have. And new data is still coming in through as well with that stored proc and starting new records from PostgreSQL. So, what we've covered today is that we set up a PostgreSQL database. We then used the Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL native application that we had installed into our Snowflake account. And then we went ahead to configure the agents so that we have a successful connection between our PostgreSQL database and our Snowflake connector for PostgreSQL, replicated the tables using our connector and calling in those functions to create our destination database and to add in our source tables. And then afterwards, we then we made our dynamic table based off of the customers, merchants, products, and transactions table as well. And then after that step, we then came and we made our Streamlit application. And then the last step that we did was we called that stored proc that inserts 1,000 records into the PostgreSQL database every minute. And as we can see, there was nothing else that we needed to do on our part for the information to automatically populate. There was no additional calls that we had to do. The connector along with the dynamic table took care of that for us for any new information that has come in into the Postgres SQL side. It will automatically populate here inside of Snowflake.